Joining me now from the USA is a senior journalist, Bethany Mental. Bethany, I welcome you here to India Today and on our special morning show, The First Up. What do you make of J.D. Vance, Usha Chilukuri, the diversity that it brings to the Republican Party? And how easy or difficult do you think will it be for Vance to be able to get into this position?
Yeah, I thought it was a really touching speech. There's something about J.D. Vance that has really resonated with Americans. His book was a bestseller for months and months and months, and it shot back up the charts. And he credits so much of his resilience and his success to his wife Usha. I think that it was wonderful to finally hear from her. She hasn't spoken much publicly. She looked incredible. That dress was amazing. I know that all of your female watchers are thinking that.
Yes.
They really hit it out of the park.
And after 3 kids, I have to say she looks good. And also, she was very categorical in what she mentioned. What do you think it is about the issues that Vance and Usha have been mentioning? Because the fact that they come from a lot of humble background, a certain difficulty that he has faced in Ohio, but also a lot of ground issues that they have mentioned. The fact that they're not as privileged as the world may think, that they have had their struggles, specifically for J.D. Vance. And that's the American dream that they mentioned, to be able to make it. Tell us more about that.
So J.D. Vance is from Ohio, which traditionally has been a swing state that is now pretty much solidly Republican.
Okay.
But he is speaking to voters in the area of the country that Donald Trump has to win, the Rust Belt, it's called. Working class white voters who have experienced a lot of what J.D. Vance has talked about, especially with the overdoses. I'm from that area of the country, and that line where he says, you know, I got another call that someone has OD'd. That's an experience that a lot of people in the Rust Belt have had. It's one that Donald Trump focused on a lot in his first administration and that President Biden has not. And I think that that is an issue that is really going to resonate very strongly because more Americans have been lost to overdoses than all of the Vietnam and Korea wars put together.
And you make a very important point, and if you felt the connect, perhaps Vance has realized that many Americans do to different aspects that have been mentioned in the speech. So let's now compare Republicans and Democrats, Bethany, because the Bidens would be watching this. There's Kamala Harris versus Vance in many ways. How do you see that coming about? Because if there is diversity on this side, there's diversity on that side too now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting matchup when they do face off in the next debate because J.D. Vance is very sharp. He's very smart. He went to Yale. And Kamala Harris is also very sharp. And so it's going to be, I think, more of an interesting matchup than we saw for the top of the ticket with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, that's for sure. That debate was a little sleepy. The vice presidential debate will not be sleepy.
Bethany, how have you seen the discourse change, let's say, from the Obama administration to Trump's, to Biden's, and possibly to either Trump or Biden this time? The sort of the reactions that have come in. President Biden has also said political temperatures need to come down. Trump has this assassination attempt survival right now in the background, so he'll want to emerge stronger. How do you think the Republicans will want to use it to come across, to be able to win the support base?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come down to the visual. Today, Joe Biden was diagnosed with COVID.
Correct.
And he was videoed going up the stairs of Air Force One very slowly, very carefully, very deliberately. And if you compare and contrast that to the image of Donald Trump getting literally shot in the head, he got shot through the ear, and he jumps up and he's yelling, "Fight!" I mean, that's a contrast.
And also, I think it kind of showed the presence of mind. Donald Trump has known cameras for very long, so he understands how this could play out as well. I request you to stay on, Bethany, because we are receiving some big breaking news coming in on the recent assassination issue here. That gunman's phone had details about both Donald Trump and Joe Biden is what the FBI officials have said. They've put out a statement that the FBI officials have told the members of the Congress on Wednesday that the gunman who tried to kill the former President Donald Trump used his cell phone and other devices to search images. Images of both the figures, other figures as well, public figures. And remember, he's a 20-year-old young man who was, though, shot dead right away at that location. But it will raise a lot of questions on what exactly happened. So Bethany Mendel, a senior journalist, continues to be with us. Bethany, how has this situation been seen? Because we're talking about whether it's drug overdose or the gun epidemic issues, but eventually it's a 20-year-old young man, not with any past criminal record, not with any known even Republican or Democrat political views, and yet decides to, for some reason, shoot Donald Trump. How is this being seen on the ground in America? And now that we are receiving details that he was accessing and trying to search for more images.
So it's interesting because we've actually gotten a very muddled view of him. He was a registered Republican, but he had donated to Democratic causes. So it's really not clear who he was and what he was after with this assassination attempt. I think there's a lot of frustration from Americans that we still know this little. Days later, it's a very frustrating situation because, there was the biggest mass shooting in American history in Las Vegas, and we still don't know why that person did that. And I think a lot of people point to FBI incompetence for the reason why. And I think there's a lot of fear on the part of many Americans that this is going to get pushed down the same memory hole.
Bethany, there are just months to go now. There's this chorus for Joe Biden to step down. He said, I'm not going anywhere unless it's some big medical issue. While Donald Trump is trying to emerge stronger, Vance has been announced. How is the temperature like in the USA ahead of these elections now?
So it's interesting because there's still, I guess we're 3 months away from the debate. There's still being questions from Democrats that they're asking Joe Biden, why are you still in the race? Chuck Schumer, one of the top Senate Democrats, is quietly asking that question. Adam Schiff, one of the top Democrats in the House, publicly came out today and said he thinks that Joe Biden should step down. And so there's still this steady drumbeat of Democrats who are watching the fact that Joe Biden might not just lose the presidency for Democrats, but that effect will trickle down the ballot and hurt them in the House and in the Senate, and it could lose Democrats both of those legislative houses.
Bethany, what I find very interesting is precisely because both have an age factor around them. Both have given out statements which have raised a lot of concerns, whether it's incoherence or just it's too provocative. But do you think that America stands at a very crucial juncture right now? It has a lot of ground issues to take care of, whether it's about narcotic substances or the aspirations of the young or the gun issues or just the political leadership in its place. But it's at a very important stage. We're looking at global conflicts around us. America has often been supportive of one side or another. Whoever gets decided this time as the leader will not just be for USA, but for global alliances.
Yeah, it's a real turning point, I think. It feels a little bit like we're living in a simulation. The assassination attempt on Saturday, it feels otherworldly, the fact that he came within millimeters of death. Everything feels like we're really barreling in a moment that feels a lot like 1968. And we're not sure where we're headed, but it really feels like the ship is careening out of control and no one is really steering it. That's my feeling on this side of the ocean.
I just have last few more questions on this. Let's go back to Vance as well, because I find it very interesting that when he was speaking, and if you can tell us more about it, that Usha, the wife, spoke before, introduced him. Is this protocol, is this common, or do you think that possibly the Republicans or J.D. Vance thought of this in a very specific way to also introduce and perhaps end any sort of apprehensions to an immigrant wife, to the diversity in the Republican Party? How do you see that turning out? Because we also have their wedding pictures. It shows the kind of inclusiveness that the family has.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is definitely part of that he wanted to show the fact that, a lot of Democrats throw a smear of, that Republican is a white supremacist, and saying that to a man who has an Indian wife whose, parents were immigrants falls very flat. And I think that he wanted to absolutely portray that. But they are the young part of this ticket and the young part of anyone running for president. Kamala Harris doesn't have any children. And Joe Biden and Donald Trump are, in their 80s or nearing their 80s. And J.D. Vance and his wife Usha have 3 very young children, and the first images that came out of J.D. Vance's team following the fact that he was named as the vice presidential candidate was him goofing around with his kids. He was walking through the streets of Milwaukee with his 3 young children. So I think that they really wanted to showcase his personal side. She really stood up there and said, this is the man I know. He's the same man. And a lot of that was pushing back on changes that JD Vance has had, especially about what he's said about Donald Trump in the past, because he was very critical. And so I think that she was also reassuring Republican voters that, you know, my husband is still the same man.
Bethany, you know, I cannot let you go before I ask one small question as an Indian journalist to an American journalist, which is, there's an Indian origin, so to say, vice president already. Possibly the second lady is going to be Indian origin. How is that being seen on the ground in the USA about the Indian community?
I mean, I think it's very exciting for the Indian community. I think that the beautiful thing about America is that we don't see Usha as Indian American. We just see her as American. That's how I see her.